The Atlanta Braves entered 2022 with some high expectations coming off a World Series championship. And while they had a great season, it obviously didn't end like we hoped, but still there were some great moments throughout. We're going to do our 2022 season review. I'll give you my thoughts on the Atlanta Braves season, give you my team awards, who was the MVP, Cy Young, most improved, who disappointed the most. We'll cover all of that on this episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. Make sure you download the Locked On Sports Atlanta app on Roku and Amazon Fire devices. You get this podcast as well as all the coverage for the Hawk season that just started, the Falcons, everything happening in Atlanta. And if you are new, I am your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall. Check out my bio there to see where I am covering the game of baseball. Make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Send in any questions, comments, or feedback that you have for the podcast. And also get notifications when I go live. I'm doing these live episodes during the offseason, so make sure you come and be a part of that. It's been a lot of fun interacting with you, the listener. Thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen each and every day. Continue to post episodes daily throughout the week in the off season. So be on the lookout for that. Make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. And before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you that it's brought to you by SimpliSafe Home Security. With the Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe, 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police response. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Visit simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to learn more. On today's episode of Locked On Braves, I'm going to give you my final thoughts on the 2022 season overall. I'm going to kick off a series looking at, reviewing individual player performances for 2022. But this will kind of be my final recap as far as how the season went. I hand out some team awards from the season, talk about who is the MVP, the Cy Young. We'll talk about most improved and who disappointed as well. So go ahead, if you're with me live on the podcast, start sending in those submissions of who was your MVP, your Cy Young, your Rookie of the Year. There's some tough ones, and who disappointed the most for you. And we'll cover those a little bit later on in the podcast. But let's start out. Let's go all the way back to the offseason, because it was a pretty wild offseason as well. Maybe some of you have pushed it out of your minds at this point, but Braves went into the offseason after winning a World Series, the biggest high that you can get as a baseball fan, your team holding up that trophy. And then the realization hit that, oh no, the Braves could lose Freddie Freeman. He is a free agent. And then not long after that came the lockout. And the lockout lasted a long time. It delayed the start of the season, led to a very short time frame for general managers to get everything done before the season started. And as a result, I do think this played a big factor into it. I don't know that we've ever really discussed it a lot, but I think that led to what ultimately happened with Freddie Freeman, him ultimately going to the Dodgers, or I guess before that, the Braves pivoting to trade for Matt Olson to fill that first base void, knowing they had to get something done with the season ready to get underway. After that happened, Freddie Freeman then signed his deal with the Los Angeles Dodgers. So that was a big shakeup before the season even started, and obviously, had some ripple effects throughout the clubhouse, the team, the fan base even, before, again, the 2022 season even started. There was also a shocking signing late in spring training as well, with the Braves signing Kenley Jansen to what we figured was already going to be a really good bullpen with, Tyler Matick, A.J. Minter, Will Smith, Luke Jackson, the night shift from last year. Turns out, Luke Jackson ended up having season-ending surgery. Tyler Matick was not himself. He ended up having Tommy John surgery. Will Smith was not good at all, ended up getting traded. A.J. Minter was the only one of those four who had a good season. So it was a big move and smart move from Alex Anthopoulos to go out and sign at Kenley Jansen. That was a big, shocking addition late in the offseason. And then the biggest storylines for me going into the 2022 season, and I had written this over at tomahawktake.com before the season began. And my biggest storylines were, can Austin Riley repeat his 2021 performance? I would say he certainly did that and was probably the Braves' best offensive player from beginning to end. My other big storyline, which young starter would step up? I would say Kyle Wright and Spencer Strider both fit that. They both stepped up in the Braves rotation. Matt Olson versus Freddie Freeman, a discussion we were always going to have. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but obviously Freddie Freeman did great things for the Dodgers, what you would expect. And I think Matt Olson did exactly what you would expect him to do. And I wrote this as well back when I was writing for Tomahawk Take, is that Matt Olson, he gave you, he was the player the Braves traded for. He gave you power. He gave you RBI production. He gave you exactly what you expected to get from him. Could there have been a little bit more to be desired? Yeah. And I think, he'll benefit the most from the shift going away next year, but still he gave you the home runs. He gave you the RBI, exactly what the Braves traded for. The other big storyline was the return of Ronald Acuna Jr. We got to see that. There were some ups and downs with that as well. It just seemed like, never really got to take off the way we were hoping. And maybe, that was wrong of us to just assume that he was going to come back from a major injury like that and be the Ronald Acuna Jr. that he's been. We saw spurts of that, but certainly was a roller coaster ride for Acuna this year as he'd come back, he'd play well for a little bit, then kind of cool off. Then there was just dealt with injuries, all throughout. I'll talk more about Acuna here in a moment. And then my biggest storyline, can the Braves repeat? And, obviously nobody's done that in a really long time. Nobody's done it in the National League in a really, really long time. And the Braves were unable to do that and pull that feat off in 2022, but still a great season. Despite getting off to a dreadfully slow start, and you all know the story at this point, in those first 2 months, they split a 4-game series against Cincinnati to start the year at home. They lost 2 of 3 to the Nationals right after that. They lost series to the Marlins, Rangers, and Diamondbacks all in those first 2 months, split a bunch of series as well. Just never could, get things going. Lost 5 series to teams they should have handled and were 23-27 at the end of June. Dansby Swanson was dreadful out of the gate in April. For a while, it was pretty much only Matt Olson and Austin Riley that were hitting. Really, in that first month in April, it was really just Matt Olson that was doing good work. Travis DeMeritt came in and had a hot stretch for the Braves from April 22nd to May 14th. He was 18 of 55, 327 with 3 home runs. I love those moments from unexpected players throughout the year that maybe you forget at the end, but Travis DeMeritt there for a little bit brought some life and a spark to the Braves lineup. Wright and Freed were the only good starters for a while in the Braves rotation as Ian Anderson was bad. Charlie Morton struggled out of the gate. They couldn't find a 5th starter. Bryce Elder held it for a little bit. Tucker Davidson, Kyle Muller got a shot. Just never could find somebody for that 5th starter spot. So rotation was kind of a mess in those first 2 months. Offense really wasn't clicking top to bottom. I really don't think the offense clicked top to bottom at the same time all year long. But then June came. You got the 14-game winning streak. We're really the best team in all of baseball after that point. Dansby took off. Michael Harris joined the team and settled down the outfield defensively, but then also brought a lot of production at the plate. William Contreras became a big part of the picture as well after Manny Pena got injured. Strider joined the rotation. And then that's when things really took off. You talk about those 5 series they lost in the first 2 months. After June 1st, they lost series to the Cubs, which ended their 14-game winning streak. They lost series to the Dodgers, where they blew that game on Sunday night. Lost a couple series to the Mets, including that 5-game series in Citi Field, which was really another turning point. Lost a series to the Phillies. Lost a series to the Cardinals, where they blew both of those losses were blown late, one in the 8th inning, one in the 9th. Lost a series to the Mariners, one to the Giants, and one to the Marlins. I say all that there was 3 series really after June 1st that the Braves lost against teams they probably should have beaten. And they had 5 of those in the first 2 months. So it just tells you the turnaround that this team had. I mentioned Ronnie a minute ago. Kind of felt like he never got to take off. His first 31 games, he slashed 316, 411, 538 with 6 homers, 8 doubles, and 11 stolen bases. And at the end of the season, he slashed 266, 351, 413, 15 home runs, 24 doubles, 29 stolen bases. So he did a lot of his damage in less than a third of the games that he played to start the year. Again, just kind of that roller coaster just of injuries, as you would expect coming off a big injury. Again, I've talked about it. I'm already expecting him to go off in 2023, but certainly was a frustrating year for Ronald Acuna Jr. and his fans as well, who I don't think we ever really got to see that real Ronald Acuna Jr. for a long stretch with the Braves. And then it all came down to the series at home against the Mets at the end of the year. And the Braves came through, they swept the Mets, ultimately led to them winning the division. They won one game in Miami to get it done. And quite honestly, that was the Braves World Series. That was your World Series this year. They were never the same after that. And that was a huge high. Look, I've talked about it. Baseball is a journey. There's ups and downs throughout a season. It's what makes it so special, so unique. And hopefully Braves fans can always at least look back at 2022 season and think about that Mets series and what the Braves had to overcome to catch them in that division and then sweep a series at home that they had to have to win the division. That was a very exciting series, just a crazy set of events to even come back and win that division, to win their 5th straight NL East title. There's something to that. I know the season didn't end the way we wanted it to, but that was certainly a special moment and a great overall season. But it just felt like the team never really was the same after that sweep. They went to Miami and, barely was able to scrape across one win to clinch the division there. And then obviously, that last game of the season was kind of a throwaway with a lot of backups in there. And then, you had the 5-day layoff. It just seemed like they never really got going again after that Mets series, which is an excuse. And that's what it is. It's an excuse. You got to be able to turn things back on or find ways to stay in rhythm. But it just felt like that sweep at the Mets at home, that was the season. The team just never really showed that life after that, whether that took it all out of them or whatever. Again, I'm making excuses for them, but they just never seemed the same. If they played like they did in that Mets series, if they played like that in the postseason, they would be going to the World Series right now and not the Philadelphia Phillies. But that's pretty much the season in review. I want to get to my awards, hand those out again. If you're watching live, let me know some of those in the chat. But we'll talk about those next. Hand out the MVP, Cy Young, Rookie of the Year, Most Improved, and Most Disappointing. We'll discuss those next. The numbers don't lie. In the last decade, over 4 million people have chosen SimpliSafe home security to protect their home. You don't earn the trust of that many people without doing something right. At SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. It's super customizable, not a situation where you have to purchase things you don't need in order to get certain things you want. The system integrates well into your home and is easy to self-install. No need to have a tech come out and schedule something or to have a bulky unit that damages or messes up your home's design. It's very useful for security and peace of mind, but also for helping you make sure everything is secure each day. It can move with you even after you install it. Just remove the elements and take them with you to your new home. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. And when you're there, save 20% on your SimpliSafe security system when you sign up for an interactive monitoring plan and get your first month free. Again, use the URL simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb to help support the show and get 20% off your order. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Time to hand out some awards. My team MVP, we can have some discussion about this if you want. I got Dansby Swanson. Look, he led the team overall with 6.4 WAR according to Fangraphs /277, 329, 447, 116 WRC plus. Possibly going to win the Gold Glove at shortstop. And for me, that's what kind of puts him over the top. Look, if I was just strictly looking at offense, we were going with best offensive player of the year, I'd give it to Austin Riley. But when you're talking about the most valuable player, what Dansby gave you at the plate and what he did defensively at the shortstop position, That's what, to me, gives him the edge, makes him the team MVP in my mind, is Dansby Swanson. Like I said, if it's not him, I think you can certainly make an argument for Austin Riley. He had a team high 142 WRC plus and had 5.5 WAR, and that's with the metrics, not favoring him defensively. I think you could also make an argument for Michael Harris II. He had a 136 WRC plus and 4.8 WAR in almost 50 fewer games than both Austin Riley and Dansby Swanson. And I talked about it when things kind of turned around. It's when he joined the lineup. Spencer Strider joined the rotation. So I think you can certainly make an argument for one of those three. But for me, because of what he did, for the all season long and what he did both offensively and defensively, I go with Dansby Swanson. But let me know if you disagree in the comments. For my team, Cy Young, it's Max Fried. 5 WAR, 2.48 ERA, 1.01 WHIP, 225 average against, and I feel like 75% of those hits were weak balls on the infield or ones that just snuck through the infield. 170 strikeouts and a team high 185.1 innings pitched. He is this team ace. Look, maybe Spencer Strider becomes that, but for this year, for me, it was Max Fried, and I really hate the way the year ended for him. Whatever the reasoning, he didn't feel good, whatever it might have been, certainly did not finish the way he wanted to in the postseason. But throughout the regular season, he was that guy you could count on every fifth day to go out there and give your team a chance to win. I think I mentioned Spencer Strider. I think a case can be made for him. 4.2 WAR, 2.77 ERA, a 1.92 FIP, which is just crazy. And then 202 strikeouts and just 131 and 2/3 innings pitched. Spencer Strider, great as well. His season obviously did not finish the way he wanted to, either dealing with that injury and then obviously things blowing up on him in that third inning in the postseason. And then the hardest one of all, team rookie of the year. Look, I don't have to choose, so I'm taking both. I don't know how you pick between Michael Harris and Spencer Strider. I just told you there's an argument for both of those guys to be either the MVP or Cy Young of this team. They were both just absolutely fantastic, and both were instrumental to the team's success. Look, the Braves desperately needed somebody to stabilize the outfield defense. Adam Duvall was doing all he could there in center field, but when Michael Harris moved to center, you moved Duvall into his more natural corner outfield spot, really just settled everything down. And then he helped create tremendous depth at the bottom of the lineup because he came up on fire with the bat as well. He won Rookie of the Month 3 times this year. So certainly an outstanding year. I think he's going to win the Rookie of the Year. I mean, he plays every day. I mean, he did, obviously was a big boost to the Braves when he joined them. I think Michael Harris is the one who wins it, but how do you not pick Spencer Strider? This guy set the record for fewest innings to reach 200 strikeouts in a season. I mean, he was one of the most dominating pitchers we saw in baseball and just historically dominant with the strikeouts, and what he did set the franchise record for strikeouts in a single game. I don't know how you pick between these two. Let me know who you pick. I think Michael Harris is going to win the award. Obviously, one of these two guys is going to win it. But it's just I don't have to pick between the two of them, so I'm not. So I'm saying they both are the Rookie of the Year. But two of the more outstanding rookie seasons that we've ever seen from a Braves player. Team breakout candidate for me, it's Kyle Wright. Look, we didn't know what we were going to get from Kyle Wright coming into the year. He makes 30 starts, has a 3.19 ERA, a 1.16 WHIP, 232 average against, 174 strikeouts, and 180.1 innings pitched, and backed it up with a tremendous start in the postseason as well, pitching 6 shutout innings against that Phillies team that, as you see, is red hot. And while he was matched up against Zach Wheeler, I mean, just an incredible season from Kyle Wright. Really excited about him going forward, but certainly a breakout candidate for the Braves. I think William Contreras, obviously had a breakout season as well. Manny Pena went down. Contreras kind of stepped up in that role, hit some big home runs for the Braves. We always knew the talent was there with the bat, but for me, it was the development behind the plate as well, blocking balls, calling games. I thought he made tremendous strides there defensively behind the plate, and obviously what he brings with the bat. And then getting into the negative, the biggest disappointment of the year, I think it has to be Ian Anderson, mainly just because he's been so good in his career with the Braves and so dominant in the postseason. And then he just absolutely fell apart this year. He made 22 starts, and I think it was probably 10 starts too many. If the Braves would have had anybody else that they thought they could rely on, which I thought Kyle Muller probably should have gotten a chance way before he did. But either way, Ian Anderson, 5 ERA, a 1.51 whip, 264 average against, 54 walks, and 97 strikeouts and 111 and 2/3 innings. He did have 10 wins on the year, which just is another argument to show you that wins don't mean too much in the grand scheme of things, although Kyle Wright obviously would probably beg to differ, but was not a great season for Ian Anderson. Ended injured as well. Hope he has a big bounce back in 2022. I think he knows the things he needs to work on, and he may just need more time to develop those secondary pitches. Some honorable mentions for biggest disappointments. For me, these aren't nearly as bad. Will Smith, obviously, you expected him to be a big part of the bullpen. Had a 4.38 ERA and a 1.51 whip with the Braves before getting traded. Charlie Morton, I hate to really put him here. His season was just so weird. You look at his 1.23 whip, not terrible, 4.34 ERA. Again, not terrible. He had some ups and downs. He had some great outings followed by some flops. It was the 28 home runs, though, that were just really, really hurt the Braves, and none bigger than that one in game 4 of the NLDS that he gave up to Brandon Marsh. But the home run ball, the hit batters, the walks, just the inconsistency, from a guy you're paying $20 million that you're expecting to be a 2-3 starter in your rotation, and he honestly just pitched more like a 4. So a little bit of a disappointment from Charlie Morton, who again is came off a pretty big injury, a broken leg, coming back this year. Certainly hoping for better things for him in 2023. Marcell Ozuna is obviously a big disappointment for me, as I think he is probably for most of you. A 687 OPS in 124 games, another off the field issue that kind of took away from the team. So again, I think Alex will try to get rid of him at all costs this offseason. And then Eddie Rosario as well, bit of a disappointment. It was pretty much a lost season for Eddie. I mean, the guy couldn't see, for the beginning of the year, and obviously couldn't hit as a result, but ended the year with a 587 OPS in 80 games. So, obviously a bit of a disappointment for Eddie Rosario after a huge 2021 with the Braves, hoping for big things for him, kind of settling in that left field job and taking that left field job, which was honestly a bit of a black hole for the Braves most of the season. So a bit of a disappointment there from Rosario. And then some injuries that hurt this year. Obviously, Ozzie Albies was a big injury that hurt. I thought the second baseman did a pretty good job of holding things down in his absence, whether it was Arcia for a while, Vaughn Grissom coming up, and then Arcia again. I thought those guys did a pretty solid job. Ozzie was off to a pretty slow start at the plate himself. The Adam Duvall injury, I think, ended up hurting the Braves maybe more because, like I said, left field became a bit of a black hole for the Braves this year. At least if you had had Duvall out there, you would have been set, defensively, and then perhaps Duvall would have heated up at the plate a little bit, at least gave you some more pop in the lineup. Like, I've never been a huge fan of his bat. It's pretty much hit or miss, and he pretty much, like Ozuna, kind of takes advantage of bad pitching, but can't, hit the better pitchers. But I do think the Adam Duvall injury was maybe a little bit more of the factor for the Braves this year than maybe we realize. And then Luke Jackson and Tyler Matick, I mentioned the night shift. Only one of the 4 really had a huge impact this year. Luke Jackson didn't even begin the year, as he had Tommy John surgery before the season started. Tyler Matick obviously wasn't the same, kind of felt like something was going on there. And then at the end of the year, it turns out he needs Tommy John surgery as well. But overall, I guess you could throw in Ronald Acuna Jr. here and just the injuries, the ups and downs that he had all year trying to stay healthy. Obviously hurt the Braves a good bit, but not a ton of devastating injuries for the team, honestly. They did a pretty good job avoiding, major injuries to key players. Obviously Ozzie Albies is an all-star second baseman, and that's a pretty big blow. But again, I thought the guys who filled in for him did a pretty Nice job. So that's kind of my awards for the 2022 season. I want to come back. I want to take a look at some of your awards, what you got going on in the chat, and do a little playoff roundup as well. We have our World Series matchup, and it may not be the pair that you thought it was going to be. We'll discuss that next. So the Braves, certainly, when they played the Philadelphia Phillies, you knew you were playing a hot team, but wow, are they on a hot streak. And after they take care of the Padres in 5 games, they are now moving on to take on the Houston Astros, the opponent that the Braves played last year. And there's so many similarities between this Phillies team last year and the Braves team last year and the Phillies team this year. And they get the same opponent as the Braves. However, I think this Astros team is I picked them to win in the beginning before the postseason even started. They've yet to lose in the postseason. They played a lot of close games. Almost all of their games were decided by 2 runs or less, but they've won all of them so far, including a comeback victory in Game 5 in Yankee Stadium to finish off the Yankees. So I think it's going to be a very exciting series. Look, this Phillies team, I keep saying it, and I know Braves fans don't like hearing it, but they are really hot, and they look very similar to that Braves team from last season where they got some great starting pitching. Their bullpen's coming into form at just the right time, and they have guys up and down the lineup that can take you deep and are going deep right now. And Bryce Harper obviously is on one. So Phillies are a dangerous team. Hopefully it's going to be a pretty good series as a baseball fan. Looking forward to watching that. Now I want to go through some of the comments if you're live with me here and just see what others had to say about the season. Lone Wolf said, I got to say, Matick was my biggest disappointment. Ozzie being injured most of the year was a big disappointment too, but not his fault, of course. I really just hated it for Matick. You kind of see from the start, I mean, the guy gave it his all to win in 2021, and I thank him for that, but got to think there was some residual effect of that in 2022, leading to ultimately him having surgery. Thomas Evans says, Cy was Kyle Wright. Okay. MVP, Dansby, Rookie of the Year, Harris, disappointment, Rosario's, surprise, Wild Bill. I can definitely agree with those and some of the ones I mentioned there. Lone Wolf also said Rosario was pretty bad. Ozuna, the biggest disappointment on and off the field. That coming from William. Lone Wolf says, yeah, hopefully Acuna will be back to being himself next year. I certainly hope so, and I think so as well. Look, I mean, again, I think I took for granted the type of injury this guy was coming back from and expecting him to just come back like it was nothing. We see that he's a little bit human, and perhaps it's going to take him a little bit longer. I think maybe he even rushed coming back. Who knows if things would have played out differently, but certainly, the nagging injuries that come along with that ACL injury, are going to be something he's going to have to learn to deal with and perhaps play through. But I am expecting a big year from him in 2023. Lance says, most disappointing was Rosario. Shadow Ninja said, I'm disappointed for Marcell Ozuna. I think a lot of us are right there. Lone Wolf said, right for most improved. I certainly agree with that. Lance said, I still think this was a pretty remarkable season considering all the hurdles. I do too. Look, starting off the year, whatever you want to say about it, I think the team was obviously a little shocked about Freddie Freeman not coming back. Matt Olson trying to figure into a new team and a new league. Acuna coming back from injury. There's a lot, to go through. Losing Ozzie Albies, one of your team leaders, certainly was a lot of hurdles to overcome. The Mets getting off to the hot start. So yeah, look, only one of 30 teams can win a World Series, can be the last team, standing. It doesn't happen very often. If your pure enjoyment from a season comes from if my team holds the World Series trophy or not, you're setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment. I think when you look back at this 2022, at least the regular season, you gotta think at the good times and how great the season was and what this team, really had to overcome to win that division. And the way they did it at the end, sweeping the Mets, was pretty spectacular and a lot of fun. Thomas Evans says MVP was Dansby. I certainly agree there. Hey to Mike and CJ, Shadow Ninja. Thank y'all for joining the chat. Rico Baker says Strider. I don't know what he's saying Strider for, but certainly Strider, it was a great piece for this year for the Braves and kind of unexpected. look, when the season started, I said the Braves should start Spencer Strider in AAA, let him continue to develop as a starter, and then perhaps bring him up later. In effect, that's kind of what they did. They started him out in the bullpen, let him, kind of work his way into that starter role, and then just kind of took off from there. Thomas Evans says, Wright was a sigh for me. We knew what Freed was giving us. Wright stepped up and stabilized the rotation. I certainly agree with that. Rico says co-rookies Harrison, Strider. Yeah, look, I don't have to pick. I'm not going to. I think both of those guys deserve it. I think you got to give them co-rookie of the year. Mike Morgan says it was an awesome regular season. I'm grateful to have been able to follow and embrace my teams and mostly up and downs. Look, that's it for me right there, Mike. The what I love about baseball, it's a journey. It's the ups and downs. Only one team's going to be able to hold that trophy at the end. You got to enjoy the moments, the journeys, the ups and downs. Certainly there were a lot of those for the Braves this year, but a lot more ups than there were downs for the Braves team. Thomas Evans, Wild Bill breakout. I certainly love that. I'm excited about the future of William Contreras. Again, for me, even more so defensively with what he did. Strider's jersey was sent to MLB Hall of Fame for the 16K game. Because of that, he wins Rookie of the Year. That's Master Chief Joe saying that. That's, again, I don't know how you don't pick Spencer Strider, but then I don't know how you don't pick Michael Harris. I'm glad I don't have to make that decision. Ozuna was the biggest disappointment on and off the field. Ozuna's biggest disappointment. A lot of those coming in. Rosario never got going. It was just a lost year for him. Acuna hopefully is better next year. Now that he has a full year to recover from the ACL. I'm right there with you. We missed Ozzie. I think we missed his leadership. I think we missed his defense. Again, I thought Arcia did a fine job there for a while before he cooled off, and then Grissom came in and was hot for a while, and then he cooled off. So I thought those guys did a pretty solid job. Joseph recap. I completely forgot. I'm sitting here talking about Will Smith. I forgot he has a chance to win another World Series ring this year with part of the Astros team. That's pretty crazy how that just slipped my mind there. Surprise for me was Dansby Swanson. Yeah, what he did offensively, look at him at the exact right time. He's going to capitalize on that greatly. Matt Olson will be better next year. Mark my words. That's Joseph recap. I certainly think so. Look, I think Acuna's in for a breakout 2023. I shouldn't say breakout, but maybe a rebound, even though 2022 wasn't terrible by, the standards of a normal player. But I think Acuna is going to have a big 2023, and I think Matt Olson will as well. Again, just the shift going away, I think raises his average at least 10 points, if not more. William Fulgham says, surprise for me was Harris. AA to Rookie of the Year, huge surprise. Yeah, from AA to Rookie of the Year, huge surprise. Certainly didn't see that coming. 30-plus bombs and 100 RBI, and it may be his worst season. Sounds crazy, but maybe true. I think Thomas is talking about Olsen there for sure. I think he's going to be even better, and I'm looking forward to big things from Matt Olson. Lone Wolf says it'll be interesting to see if we see Grissom play left field next year. I think that's going to be a big storyline all offseason and even going into spring training, seeing what they do with him. Gold Glove, Swanson will get one. Freed will win one. I think you're right. I think both of those guys probably take home Gold Gloves. D'Arnaud up for one, Olsen up for one as well, and somehow Michael Harris was not. Patrick says, is it realistic put Grissom in left field next year? What can we expect? I think so. I think he's athletic and young enough that he could learn the position, but that's a big ask. And do you know going into the year, it's a possibility that maybe you send him to AAA and let him work on that, and then perhaps bringing up later. But then do you go in the season not knowing who your left fielder is? Do you go into the season starting Rosario out there and maybe Ozuna as well if neither of those guys can be traded? So I think it's definitely something that they explore. We know they've already at least put him out there to start that. CJ says, should we get Jock back? Still getting questions about Jock. Look, I've said it. I said it on earlier podcast. I just don't see the redundancy of having him and Rosario. If you could perhaps shed some money with Rosario and Ozuna, then maybe you get Jock. But I don't view Jock as an everyday left fielder. I view him as a platoon bench type bat. But I would love to have him instead of Rosario because that's what I think Rosario is at this point. Shadow Ninja says, can't wait for Mike Soroka return. I can't either, man. I am so ready for Mike Soroka. Just hope that he's healthy, has a good offseason, comes back next year. Thomas Evans with those same sentiments. Certainly, look, 2023 is so exciting for me, with the idea of Acuna having, another year of getting healthy, coming back, Matt Olson being more comfortable in this league in his role, Mike Soroka potentially coming back, Spencer Strider a full season as the starter. Look, the future is very bright for this Braves team. I know it didn't end the way we necessarily wanted it to, but the future is so exciting. I'm so ready for the 2023 season already for this Braves team. But for now, we got a lot of offseason to get through. We'll be here covering that. Going to start doing my player reviews here starting this week as well. So be on the lookout for those. And obviously, when the offseason picks up after the World Series we'll have a lot more of that going on. I've already kind of kicked that off, looking at the biggest offseason needs, talking about Dansby Swanson. So you want to go back and visit those podcasts, you can. But that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Thanks to all those who joined me live. And also, always thank you for giving us a listen and making us your first listen of each and every day. Now go make a Locked On MLB your second listen, where MLB expert Paul Francis Sullivan brings humor, passion, and a unique perspective, talking about the biggest stories from around the league. And go check out Locked On Astros as well. Check out Connor Thomas over at Locked On Phillies. Get ready for that World Series matchup. Make sure you give them a listen as well. Again, thanks for making us a listen. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at @LockedOn_Braves. Follow me at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.